what America was doing at the UN was they got back into the UN Human Rights Council, and now they're sitting on that Human Rights Council shoulder to shoulder with Russia and China, who Russia is now committing war crimes. So Biden either needs to kick Russia out of the Human Rights Council or he needs to get off himself. America was active at the UN in dealing with this Iran deal. Can you imagine now that you're going to go in a room and negotiate with China and Russia on, how to stop Iran from producing nuclear weapons? That's a joke.
Still the ambassador at the UN right now, if you were the U.S. ambassador at the UN and you were sitting across the table from your Russian counterpart right now, what would you be saying to him? Like, how do we get Putin to turn back? Like, what do you think his off-ramp is? What would you be offering them to say, hey, okay, this thing got messy for 2 weeks, but let's back up now?
Well, first of all, Dave, I would be railing at the United Nations right now. I would have been railing every single day to get some attention towards Ukraine before this conflict happened, but also to kind of rally the world into not just saying you're with Ukraine, but actually doing something about it and having them act. And the first group that needs to act are the Europeans. It's their region. They need to really step up.
Did we do anything? Did we do anything at the UN? I mean, this was like a slow motion war for 3 weeks where Biden kept saying, oh, it's going to happen. Maybe it'll happen tomorrow, 3 days. I mean, were we doing anything at the UN?
Oh, yes, absolutely. What America was doing at the UN was they got back into the UN Human Rights Council, and now they're sitting on that Human Rights Council shoulder to shoulder with Russia and China, who Russia is now committing war crimes. So Biden either needs to kick Russia out of the Human Rights Council or he needs to get off himself. America was active at the UN in dealing with this Iran deal. Can you imagine now that you're going to go in a room and negotiate with China and Russia on how to stop Iran from producing nuclear weapons? That's a joke. And it's a fireable offense if Biden continues to try and get into this Iran deal. And so, yeah, they were doing things, but they were doing all the wrong things. And what they should have been doing was rallying the troops. What they should have been doing was tough love to the Europeans, saying, stop this. And, one of the things I did was I was constantly beating up Germany for Nord Stream 2. And, and we were constantly saying this can't happen. That never should have been allowed to happen this year. So there were a lot of things done. It just were all the wrong things.
So when they have a resolution at the UN and one of the countries that's doing the invading has veto power, is it all just theater? I mean, at the end, is it just sort of ridiculous theater? Because Russia vetoed the resolution about Russia. You can't blame them for doing that.
So the interesting thing is, yes, Russia vetoed the resolution in the Security Council. But what they were able to do that Russia couldn't do anything about was they took it to the General Assembly, the 193 countries. And what happened was, basically the world condemned Russia. There were only 5 countries on the side of Russia, Russia included. But Russia stood there with Syria and North Korea. Those are not friends you want to be sitting on the corner with. And that's who they were. And so, yeah, they did that. But at the end of the day, what does a resolution do, right? So, yes, it's, you're condemning, you're telling Russia you're bad, you got to stop, but it's not doing anything. And so, there goes to my frustration with the United Nations is, saying something and acting that's great. Now what? Now we got to do more.
So what does a sane resolution of this situation look like to you? I mean, is this something that we're just going to be sort of slowly in for a long time? Is there something that we can do to give Putin that off-ramp so that he doesn't have to escalate? What does an actual out of this look like?
Well, I think look at the environment, right? So you've got Ukrainians taking to the streets to defend themselves. You've got Russians. It's pretty ironic that you've got thousands of Russians taking to the streets of Russia, protesting Putin. Extremely courageous because they know that they'll be killed. They know that they'll be jailed for doing that. You've got, the Europeans really stepping up at a time to help Ukraine. I think that you're going to see Russia's going to continue to take Ukraine by force. I think they're going to kind of sit on the barrier for a while and try and see how much progress they can make. But at the end of the day, Putin's going to try and put one of his own lackeys in government, in Ukraine. But the Ukrainian people aren't going to go for that. I mean, I think you've seen the spirit of the Ukrainian people. They're not ever going to go for that. So Putin's got to figure this out. He's already become a pariah in the world. He's isolating himself. So he's already very paranoid. I think he's worried about being eliminated himself. We know that he's trying to eliminate Zelensky. I think this isn't going to be done in a couple of days. The sad part is the media is going to get tired of days. The media is not going to have constant Ukraine shots, and everybody else is going to go back to their business, but the bloodshed's not going to stop. And I think this is going to last a while.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the media part of this, because I feel that it's my job to just sort of translate some of this stuff to my audience and bring on people like you who are the experts in this so that they can get an honest assessment of this. One of the things that I'm really struggling with right now is who to trust. I've lost such trust in our corporate press that, it's very hard for me to pick up the New York Times that I feel lies about so many things and say, oh, but this is the thing they're telling the truth on. How do you, is it just from talking to other ambassadors and talking to people on the ground? How do you get news that makes sense to you?
I read a lot, and I read a lot of different sources. And I have been in conversations with my counterpart at the United Nations from Ukraine, who's now back in Ukraine. We're talking to people who have families on the ground in Russia. You read as much as you can, and you take all the opinions out of it. That's the key. The media wants to tell you what to think. You don't need to know what to think. You need to know the facts. And then you put together what you think on your own. And so, you can't read too much, but the media at this point, I will say the media, at least they're covering Ukraine in what is a fair way. They're not trying to, rosy up on Putin. They're calling him the thug that he is. They're showing the bloodshed that's happening. They're highlighting Zelensky and the brave people of Ukraine. And I think that's what we need to see. But, the media hasn't been an outlet to trust for a very long time.
Do you think that if it was the guy that you worked for, President Trump, and this was happening right now, that the media would be treating this the same? It seems fairly obvious to me that the media everything would be at the footsteps of America right now. And this is what Trump brought upon us. You can actually see them doing some of that, blaming Trump for this. Psaki, you probably saw that line the other day where she said there's a pattern here of Putin invading Ukraine. She forgot that the thing that broke the pattern was the 4 years under Trump.
It's interesting because I've always told everybody, the 4 years that President Trump had, he never got an ounce of peace or one bit of credit through all 4 years. He was hammered every day, all day. And he didn't have Afghanistan. He didn't have the Ukraine mess. He didn't have inflation like this. He didn't have the crime in the streets. He didn't have all that. And they still beat up on him. And then, to go have them hail Biden's State of the Union speech as this amazing unifier, it wasn't that. All it was a lot of Republican talking points saying, we've got to get rid of crime on the streets. We've got to put kids back in school. We have to choose freedom over tyranny. We've got to fund the police. Well, guess what? We've been saying that this entire year that Biden's been in office, and now he's saying it, but he didn't offer one solution, not one solution. And, the only solution, Dave, is to win the races in 2022. We've got to take back the House. We've got to take back the Senate. We've got 36 governor's races. And if you ever saw the importance of a governor, you saw it during COVID, and you saw some fantastic Republican governors go and protect their people. And I think that we've got to really make sure that we put a stop to all of this progressive extremism that we're seeing come out of the left, and, stop Biden and try and, say a prayer along the way, because it's going to be a long 3 years.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.